Hi, I am Molly Barnes. I am so grateful to have as my guest today my friend Karen Florek. Karen is one of LA's top photographers. She's also curating, well, she's on the board of directors of the Tag Gallery here in Los Angeles, and she's also curating a show in New York of women shooting other women. That doesn't mean shooting with a gun, but photographing other women at the Roger Smith Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. So without further ado, Karen.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you, Karen. Now tell me how this all got started. You're married, actually, to one of the stars of Law and Order, Dan Florek.
Dan Florek. Mm-hmm.
And you met in college. Tell me that story.
Yes. I was a double major. I was in the art department, but I was also in the speech and dramatic arts department, and we met in an acting class, interpretation of literature, actually. And
Where was this, in Michigan?
Yeah, this is in Michigan. He had an assignment to perform from a piece of literature, and he chose A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. So he came in and, of course, was speaking in his English accent and started referring to his yarbles, and I think I was just smitten, and the rest is history.
You've been together 28 years?
This is our 28th year
And
anniversary.
love at first sight. He's been on that television show for 9 years?
Special Victims Unit is in their 9th year, but he was on the original Law and Order for the first 3 years, and I believe they're going into their 18th year.
And so did you make a conscious decision to become bi-coastal?
We did.
So you could stay here and then you have a place in New York as well?
We did. We had lived in New York before, near Columbia University.
Weren't you a waitress at one point to support his
Oh,
career?
I'm sure I was. I've done the Midtown businessmen's lunches, and it was a great time in our lives. You know, we didn't have a lot of money. Dan was doing theater, and I was actually designing, now that I think of it, off-Broadway theater posters for the Vineyard Theater and the WPA, and it was just a great time being in New York. And we selected to move to California because he was getting more TV work. And like a lot of couples, I'm sure we let our rented apartment in New York go. And lo and behold, he got a job in New York, so we laugh about that. But we're now back in the old neighborhood on the Upper West Side, and very happy.
Well, Karen, I hate to admit this, but I'm addicted to Law and Order, and I have an active life, and yet I watch it maybe 4 times a day. So I know every plot line. Once more, my husband and I were driving to San Francisco, and we were bored, and I said, let's think of a new game. Let's do the plot lines of Law and Order, and we came up with 79 that we knew.
Well, it sounds like a happy addiction.
And your husband, I remember, sent me an autographed picture of himself saying, "Into my office
in my
now."
office now. Yeah.
Now, the first time I saw your work was at the Tag Gallery in Santa Monica, on
Yes.
Santa Monica Boulevard, and it was scrolls of pictures you'd taken of water and also Vietnamese women. How did that come about?
I went to Vietnam in 2006 with 18 other photographers. It was a photography trip. And we went from the very furthest north of Vietnam, which was Sapa and Hanoi, through the middle of the country, the Mekong Delta, Hoi An, and then we finished in Saigon. So it was a 2-week trip of photography. And I was shooting in film. I took a couple of cameras, and when I would look at the film that I would pick up from the labs the next day, I realized that a lot of the imagery that was coming through to my psyche was of women, because it's a very fast developing country economically. There's a lot of tourism coming in, and it feeds the industry there, but there's also women still doing traditional roles in traditional dress, selling wares and working in the rice paddy. So I started to actually juxtapose the images of the modern Vietnam next to the more traditional, and something really started to excite me about that imagery.
What are the women like? Is there any kind of equality there with women? Are there subversive elements? What do you feel when you're there?
Graceful. I think that there's an elegance to the women, and that there's appropriateness to the conversation. Wonderful hospitality, but very, very, very hardworking. When we were up in the mountain villages, the women were hauling the wood and feeding the children and going out and selling the traditional crafts of that part of the country. So I just saw them really hard working, and but quite beautiful and elegant.
You've said that when they go out to sell the work that they put on traditional costumes over there, what they're wearing to hold the wood.
I don't know what made me think that they were wearing these wool embroidered things every day, because at the end of their workday, when they're finished selling to the tourists, they go home and put on their jeans and t-shirts just like we do. So.
One of the things I notice about artists is that we see things in pictures. I mean, we're not good often with committee work, although you are, but we see things just, we just see them, and then we realize that that's the direction we want to go in. How did you hit on the scrolls, the size of the scrolls, and also working in black and white and sepia? How did that come about?
The images that ended up on the scroll sat in a box for a year and a half. I didn't think there was anything very riveting about them, but I never could quite put them down. I had a show coming up at TAG, and I knew I wanted to do something that had some impact. The way Mark Rothko talked about, can you stand in front of a piece of art and just lose yourself emotionally in it, or can art bring an emotion in you? And I thought that I could do that with some of the pictures of the river in the Mekong Delta area. So I developed them in a darkroom. I had them scanned and knew that I could go fairly large with them. It was just a matter of finding the right way to display them. I didn't want glass, I didn't want moldings, I didn't want any separation between
right. That's what's so exciting
the
about
viewer
them.
and the artwork. So I worked with this lab, and he suggested this material. It was a fiberglass paper, and I fell in love with it immediately because it was, it had this wonderful supple quality, but it had a really good body to it, and it was slightly translucent. And I realized that if I put them on the wall, they might have a little bit of a flutter kind of see-through quality to them, but you still saw the image. So it was perfect. I hung them on a rod and hung them in a series so that when you drove by the windows on Santa Monica Boulevard, you just stopped and went, wow, what is that? And then when you came in, they were just in front of you at 5 feet tall.
Did you make friends with these people?
Some. The tour guides I still keep in touch with and send pictures to back and forth. A couple of the photographers actually befriended the women who are very good salespeople, and they go back and visit them in the northern part of the country. So I'd love to go back.
My husband actually makes tapestries. He designs them on the computer, and then they're made in Vietnam.
In thread.
So we've met a number of the Vietnamese artists who work on the tapestries, and they're just wonderful people.
Yeah.
What's next in your own work?
For me, I would, well, the water as an element has really been tugging at my heartstrings. It emotes a lot. It has all of these great qualities. It's highly reflective. There's distortion involved, and so I'm going to do some water series.
Have you ever looked at any of Hockney's books, or he did a lithograph on the 7 different ways you can paint water? Yeah.
Yeah, and the whole pool series.
Yeah.
And actually made the paper from scratch that went into the pool.
Well, the swimming pool at the Hollywood Roosevelt, they had to take out because he designed it, but they felt it was a safety hazard.
Oh.
You know, he got in there and painted those lines, and he did it for a number of people in their swimming pools in LA and in New York. And then he had cross-hatching and diagonal lines that all were different kinds of rain and sleet.
He's a wonderful artist. You know, He had a huge influence on me in photography, because he started using his Polaroids to capture an interior or whatever his subject matter was from multiple points of view, not unlike what the Cubists did.
Yeah.
And it was so intriguing to me, and I took Polaroid on the trip with me, and they're of course no longer manufacturing their film, so what little left I have of that precious commodity of Polaroid film I'm going to use. But I really remember being influenced by David Hockney's work.
You mentioned Mark Rothko and then Franz Klein, who was an artist that it almost looked like a close-up of fabric. And you can take a piece of yours, although they're realist, and turn them upside down, and they're as good as they are right side up. And I've always thought that was a good mark, a way to look at a piece of art.
That even though there's a resonance there because we have a sense of what we're looking at, if the abstract qualities are strong, the art is good. You know, you and I were having a conversation about this the other day, the grid system that the Renaissance artists use to transfer their reality into their artwork. And I was thinking about that the other day, what a critical tool that is, because you're asking someone to take in information in a three-dimensional format, but make it work on a two-dimensional plane. And that's what those grids did. They flattened everything out for them.
Well, Chuck Close, there's a new documentary about him that I saw in New York a couple of weeks ago, and it really goes into detail on how he sets up the grids, or has his work people set up these grids so that he can get everything faithfully. And what David Hockney did when he discovered this technique that the Renaissance painters had done, it was almost like a magnifying glass that was shot almost like a camera, and he got every detail, and then it could be transferred onto the canvas. And at the time that he came out, he wrote a book about it, and everybody was shocked, and there were, at dinner parties, there were arguments about it. Was it real? And I thought, this is crazy. But people who are involved with the arts always like to know the origins, and also fight over what to me is almost meaningless, but it's so fascinating the way he did really promote that idea.
He did.
And also the idea of splaying images, the same thing Elizabeth Murray does, where he splayed images open by using Cubist techniques. And as you said, with those small photographs that he took. I remember he told me once that Jim McHugh, the photographer, was taking pictures, and Jim said, well, I don't know quite how to photograph you. And David said, well, why don't you take pictures of me like this, each part of me, and then just sort of string them up and I'll stand next to it.
Oh, fascinating.
And yeah, it was just absolutely perfect.
Yeah, yeah. I saw Chuck Close's pieces at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and you can get lost in all of those little squares. They're fascinating in and of themselves, and then you really do have to step back. So I like art that holds up, whether it's close and you're right on top of it, or whether you're a room distance away.
Who are some of the photographers or painters who have been important in your education of yourself?
My influence?
You've said in the past that that photography is another form of reality.
I think well, of course I love both. I came to this as a painter, and like to incorporate painting techniques into my photography, but my influences in painting were the mythical landscape painters. I just love Marsden Hartley and Emily Carr and Arthur Dove, and the counterpart to that in photography would be the pictorialism movement, the Stieglitz photographers, and Eva Rubinstein, and just these beautiful, sometimes misty, layered, illustrative photographs that you can just get lost in.
You've mentioned Gregory Amanoff, who's a friend of mine.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I love his painting, his shots of light and his wonderful abstract shapes. I really feel like here's a person who surrenders to the environment that he's in, the landscape that he's in, and like really gets what's going on some energetic level and is able to put that in a painting. I just find that compelling. You
mentioned Alfred Stieglitz, who was married to Georgia O'Keeffe.
Yeah.
And actually his gallery was right down the street from the Roger Smith.
Smith.
I know, at 281, I think it was Lexington.
The Shelton?
And she was always taking pictures, and went to see him, and he fell in love with her, and they married. And that was the only way women could get ahead at that time. I mean, women were not encouraged to go to art school. Fathers didn't want to pay the bill. They felt that it was a bohemian life. They wanted their daughters to get married, and there wasn't the idea of being an artist. But Georgia O'Keeffe broke those rules by really setting up her own. She said she would go away to the Southwest for 6 months every year, and then to Lake George. Tell me about the show you're doing of women shooting women, and how did that come about?
I was at a photography show, actually, of, it was nude photography. The photographer was a man, and I remember there were a number of us looking at the pictures in the show, and I overheard two women saying how difficult to sell the photographs would be, because she said, oh, how did she put it? Women get up in the morning every day and look at themselves in the mirror, and this is not how we see ourselves. And I thought, well, how do we see ourselves? How do women photograph other women? Is there that big a difference? So I wanted to create this opportunity to show contemporary women, emerging photographers, whose main focus is portraiture and to shoot other women. So the show is women shooting women. And I've had the most fascinating conversations with the photographers. Rachel Dunville, whom you've met, and is going to be in the show. She had her portraits at Photo LA recently, and we were talking, and she says,
you were there too. No, your work was actually at the
my work was up
Santa Monica,
the Santa Monica Art Studios, which is a wonderful venue. Great people over there.
Anyway, get back to Rachel.
She says, I was complimenting her on her work. We were picking out which pieces we were going to put in the show at the Roger Smith Hotel. And she says, you know, I have to tell you, everyone that comes into this booth starts talking to me and asks me how I know the photographer, like, what's he like, and where does he find his models? And she says, I'm the photographer. And she said, it blows me away that there's this assumption that because my models are particularly seductive, or they look right into the camera and I'm dealing with issues of desire, that this is the realm of a male photographer. And she said, why would it be any different? Why not be photographed by a woman? So I'm really thrilled to have her pieces in the show.
Well, the thing I think is interesting, because you've shown me the work that will be in the show, is that they're very seductive. They're like Helmut Newton, and you've got these women in these very grand environments like hotels, and that's the way you go into the Roger Smith Hotel now, which is at Lexington and 47th. But the legs are apart, and they're very inviting. They're sexually inviting. And I just wondered, well, I wonder if the hotel's going to put that down, or if the guests will welcome that, because it's a combination of very sexy work and then very majestic.
Yes, the formal portraiture tradition that I tried to stick with, there's an elegance there that I think we stay in the realm of good taste, and they are exquisitely photographed.
Who are some of the other people in the show?
Well, there's two Canadian photographers, Dominique Paul and Marissa Portalese are flying in, and I love Dominique's work. She has these really interesting surfaces, and when I asked her how she did it, thinking there must be some digital trick, she says, no, I create mold on a slide, and then I superimpose the slide onto the person that I'm photographing. So it's all captured on film, but this texture is, I said, the texture that I'm looking at is projected mold, and she said, yes. I said, I love it.
Oh, fantastic.
So who else do we have?
You have the person that's on the announcement.
Oh, Elaine Smithson. Now, she is a California photographer. I love Elaine.
It'll be a picture of her mother, which is Whistler's mother, and then in the background are changing portraits.
She was very influenced by the painting Whistler's Mother, and she decided to do a series using her own mother, where she fabricated these backgrounds and then dressed her mother up in various outlandish outfits. She's got a great one. It's on her website. It's not in the show, but it's she dresses her mother up as Elvis, and the one in the show is after a Gainsborough painting with Blue Boy in the background. But she brings a wonderful humanity and a sense of humor, thank God, to her photography. So much of the world now is so difficult, and she's really, I think, a guiding light as far as
Who
her
else is in
imagery.
it? Anybody else from Los Angeles in the show?
Yes, Cheryl Himmelstein, whose work I love. She's done a couple of editorial spreads for the Los Angeles Times. She
Oh,
did a
I've seen her work, yeah.
Beautiful series on teen mothers. So I selected a portrait of a young Latina girl with her new baby, and she's still in high school. And she's a new mom.
Now, in a situation like that, will the family help her out so she can get through school?
I think so. This is from Vista High School, so I don't know if there was some kind of help that came from the photography project, but I'm guessing that any kind of exposure to that situation helps financially. She also did a waitress series, which I loved. It was hysterical. Waitresses in LA. I'm also showing Wendy Marvel, who does self-portraiture, and Diane Meyer, who teaches photography at Loyola Marymount. She is, I love Diane, she's hysterical. She hires celebrity lookalikes.
No.
And poses them with her in the photograph. So there's a shot of her and Jack Nicholson having lunch at a diner, and there's a shot of her and Prince playing Scrabble. So she really deals with this portraiture and celebrity and who else? Oh, and do you know Melissa Sharp?
Not yet.
She does painting with light, and she's doing a whole portrait series of women where the photo session actually takes place in the dark, and she's lighting you with a flashlight, and sometimes her exposures are 3 hours long, and they're beautifully eerie portraits of women.
Do you remember when Picasso painted with light?
Yes.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I love that picture.
You know, Richard Prince just had a show at the Guggenheim Museum, and he did satires on de Kooning and Rosenquist and the movie Bullet. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting, I was reading in the New York Times yesterday that he has a new book out. This is a person that's doing all kinds of things, you know, following all kinds of media. Can I ask you about several photographers, women that I love? Because this really is the month of women and also the year of women artists. Sally Mann, the one who did very erotic, seemingly innocent portraits of her children nude.
I love Sally Mann's work. I know that she's been controversial. I think her.
Don't you think that's important, though, when you're an artist, to be controversial?
I like people who shake it up and kind of push.
Well, that's
the
what
edges.
I was thinking about Richard Prince. It's just shocking, but you know, he's sticking with it. I also see that when artists are making it, it's because they repeat the imagery they've discovered over and over again. You know, they don't give up on it. They just keep going.
It's not unusual to explore a subject matter in depth if there's something there that you feel you still need to engage and uncover. I remember the year that the gates were on display in Central Park, and you couldn't go anywhere in the city without finding yourself in the middle of a heated conversation about whether you loved them or not. And
also the color orange. We all just got so sick of it because there's so much.
So in terms of Sally Mann, I believe that and she is a consummate craftsperson. She's a wonderful photographer. I believe the legacy she's going to leave, aside from leave the world with, aside from her beautiful photography of her children, is that she was provocative.
Yeah.
And she got a lot of people talking, and I think that subject of children in photography and how we use them in the media is still very prevalent today.
Now, what about Annie Leibovitz?
Well, she just has a new book out now in a photographer's life, and her retrospective is at the Brooklyn Museum.
And also, her lover was Susan Sontag, who unfortunately died of breast cancer, but she documented all of that their relationship.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I bought the book and cherished the book is her commercial work. I mean, when you think of portraiture in America, you think of Annie Leibovitz. We've seen her on Vanity Fair, and yet she led us into this very intimate part of her life. She photographed her parents, she photographed Susan, and I feel, although I don't know her personally, I feel very grateful for that wide open door that she swung open to all of us with just loads and loads and loads of film that she shot.
But Karen, how does she get the ideas like John Lennon in bed? I mean, how does she come up with those things? It's just unbelievable to me.
Mm-hmm.
And even the White House, the Bush people. I mean, she makes everybody
Yeah.
You really want to know them.
Yeah. I've never seen her work, but I'm guessing she's a person that is so very much in the moment.
Yeah.
That if there's a spark there of interest, or if a client or a subject says that they're willing to go with her that next step, I think she just does not say no to an opportunity. I think she's really bold.
Last but not least, one of my favorites, Cindy Sherman.
Yes. Oh well, Cindy's got that great wall at the new.
At BCAM, at our county museum.
Yeah, yeah.
They're all women dressed in historical portraiture, and the whole wall is covered salon style.
Salon style, floor to ceiling, and they're all her. So who else better to exemplify, you talk about returning to a subject, a never-ending exploration of identity and ourselves. I love the where she dresses herself up as women from old Flemish paintings, or they're paintings that I know, and I say, oh, I've got to go back and look at that because she got it. She just got it. She's fascinating, very fascinating.
And she said that when she started, she used herself because she was the cheapest model to hire. We don't know if that's just press or if that's absolutely true, but she can make herself into anything.
Yeah.
I know Madonna sponsored a show for her in the Special Projects room at the Museum of Modern Art, and she did movie stills, you know, Sophia Loren, Marilyn Monroe, and it was just amazing that she could change herself, transport herself into each of. I always wondered, why didn't she go into show business?
So well, I was thinking of that as you were talking. I thought, God, I've seen my husband play so many roles and have so many looks, and it's been a real interesting time being together, because it's always interesting. It's never boring.
What's the next thing for you in terms of photography?
Well, I'm going to curate the show, and I already have my idea for my next curatorial venue. I really want to do a humor show. I think we all need a good, not just a good laugh, but some perspective. And I think it would be great to get some of those photographers on board. And then for me personally, I'm building a studio at home. So I'm really looking forward to some self-reflective time.
What kind of a camera do you use?
I like medium format. I love the square. Love the square. But I also do a lot of toy camera stuff. I like to play with Polaroid and some toy cameras that you buy in the store. And I have just purchased a digital camera, so I have one foot stepping into that world. We'll see where that goes.
Will there ever be an idea that you'll combine paintings and photography?
Probably, because I can never give either one up, and keeps it interesting.
Karen Florek, I cannot thank you enough for coming, and look forward to seeing your show in New York. I think it opens when?
April 4th.
April 4th in Manhattan at the Roger Smith Hotel Gallery on 47th and Lex. I want to thank you for being my guest. Art is not for everyone. It never has been. It never will be. But for those of you who love it like Karen Florek, and I do, we want to turn you on. Thanks for watching. I'm Molly Barnes.